Hello, welcome to my channel. My name is Kay and I review art books. Today I'll review Watercolor Wanderlust by Hannah M. Pickerill, an American artist. This book is all about painting beautiful landscapes. If you're a beginner, if you're fairly new to watercolour, or if you're a seasoned artist, I think you'll find something in Hannah's step-by-step tutorials that will encourage your growth and enjoyment of the watercolour medium, regardless of your skill level. So Hannah is a professional artist currently living in Cincinnati, Ohio. She's passionate about teaching and regularly shares her tips and tutorials on TikTok, Instagram and YouTube. So let's take a look inside the book. So here's firstly is an example of one of Hannah's lovely paintings. There's a dedication to her family and people who've helped her. So we have the table of contents with some basic terms and watercolour techniques. And then we go straight into the projects, of which there are 24. The first section of the book, chapter 1, Before You Start, contains the basic terms and techniques, and it only consists of a few pages. The majority of the book, in fact virtually the entire book, consists of all the projects. But I'll talk to you a little bit about that in a moment because it's been set out quite well. So in the introduction, Hannah tells us a little bit about herself and how she got started. She talks about the foundation of the book and her love for watercolour painting and teaching. And one very important note she makes before you start is don't be afraid to fail. When you're a child, you don't mind if you fail when you try something for the first time. But as adults, we seem to give up after the first try. And Hannah wants to make clear that she's made so many bad paintings in her life. But that's unfortunately is how we learn new skills, isn't it? By trying things and practicing until we get better. I've had the pleasure of meeting a lot of artists in my lifetime, and every single one without exception has told me, professional artists have told me, that they only ever show 20% of their work. The other 80% they either burn, bin or repurpose. So let's bear that in mind when we start our watercolour landscape journey with Hannah. So chapter 1, Before You Start, Hannah basically gives us an overview of how the book is organised and the types of landscapes you'll be painting, such as water scenes, deserts or forests. Each chapter, there are 4 to 6 projects that increase in difficulty. So if you're feeling really confident or you have a bit of watercolour experience, she says feel free to flip through the book with reckless abandon and find the projects that inspire you. But if you're new to watercolour and you're just a beginner, she recommends you work through the projects in order as they increase in difficulty as you work your way through the book. So here Hannah talks about her art supplies, the paint she's used, the Winsor & Newton professional watercolours. She's recommended her personal favourites, and there's a handy chart at the bottom of the page on the left that lists the colours that she uses in all the projects within the book. She uses a total of 16 colours, and throughout all the projects she has actually stated her colour recipes. So by using these 16 paints you can actually mix the same colours she's used in her landscape paintings. She mentions gouache or gouache. It's an opaque watercolour paint and she has used that quite a lot in her paintings, and she recommends that you also have a tube of that handy as well. M. Graham is her personal favourite brand, and you can also mix gouache with watercolour paint as well to create an opaque colour. Another tip is having a hairdryer handy if you want to speed up the drying process of your paint on the paper. I personally like to let it dry naturally, especially if I'm layering one colour on top of another, but there's no harm. If you've got a really good quality watercolour paper, you can speed up the drying process with a hairdryer. Here Hannah mentions how she sets up the paper for all the projects, and she will tell you which orientation, landscape or portrait, but I think it will become obvious when you actually see the photographs. She talks about reference photos. One thing about reference photos is they do tend to flatten colour, but that's just something to bear in mind. So Hannah lists basic terms and techniques such as a flat wash, gradient wash, and a gradient between colours. And she gives detailed instructions at the side of each image and explains to you how to create these 3 different washes. Here Hannah explains how to achieve different textural effects such as dry brush, wet on wet, and lifting out. Lifting out is important if you are trying to create clouds, for example. And Hannah states that during the projects, your paintings will often adopt what she calls an ugly stage, which can be quite discouraging, and you might think you're a bad artist, which is not the case at all. So she said it's important that you understand that until you've actually applied the final step, not to judge your painting. So this now brings us on to the projects. So it was a very brief chapter. Some watercolour books go into a lot more detail about using your brush, using your paint, colour theory, etc. So I would argue this book is more aimed at people who've had a bit of watercolour experience, although I do think that you could follow along. So the first project is chapter 2, Prairies and Plains. And I hope I'm saying this right, Palouse. Not heard that word before. So the first painting in this section is going to be a painting Hannah has called Rolling Hills, and she said it's a fun project and a great way to begin. So we're given an image of the final painting, or the painting that Hannah's created. Please bear in mind that yours will not look exactly like this, it'll be slightly different. And Hannah, in the materials side of the page, Hannah lists the watercolour paint she's used, the watercolour paper she's used, the size of the paper, which brushes she's used, the orientation of how she wants you to set the paper up, and she explains a little bit about what and how to sketch. So we have the paper all set up with the masking tape round it, and she's painted a sky blue sky. So to get the sky blue colour, Hannah has listed the colours she's used, which are ultramarine blue and phthalo blue. So they're the 2 colours you need to mix the colour that Hannah has on her landscape painting. And there's a pause note here. She asks you to read through steps 1 and 4 before you start working. So read through her instructions first and then return to step 1 before you start your painting. So here we have steps 5, 6 and 7. And for the muted green, Hannah's used Hooker's green and Van Dyke brown and water to make the colour a bit paler. For the muted blue green, again, she's used Hooker's green, ultramarine blue and Van Dyke brown, plus plenty of water. And all through the book, as you see, wherever Hannah's used a colour or mixed a colour of paint, she's actually listed the tubes of paint that she's used to achieve that. And here we are again, steps 8, 9 and 10. So the next project in this chapter, Hannah's called Oregon Plains, and because the book follows exactly the same format as the first project. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to turn the pages for you, accompanied by some nice music, so you don't have to listen to me repeating yourself, because the format is identical. I'll just be repeating myself over and over again like I am now, and you'll lose the will to live. So going forward now, I'm just going to turn the pages for you. So enjoy the music and you'll be able to have a look at all the projects in this book. So chapter 4, Funky Forests. Like a lot of modern watercolour books, I'm having trouble to get the book to lay flat, and it keeps moving about, so I'll try my best. The older style books, the hardback books, were often made by being stitched together, which enables the pages to lay flat without this urge to spring back together, bounce back together. It's all to do with costs of manufacturing, which is a shame. Given the choice, I always go for a hardback book if I can, for that reason. But anyway, let's crack on with chapter 4, Funky Forests. Autumn Reflections. My friend Diane Anton's studio has actually created a watercolour tutorial based on this image. She's used it as inspiration, so do check out her channel please, Diane Anton Studio. I will put a link in the description below. It's well worth a visit. She has over 1,000 watercolour tutorials. So we're halfway through the book now. Chapter 5 is all about Mountain's Majesty. Chapter 7, From Ground to Galaxy. This is quite an unusual eclectic mix in this chapter. So now we come to the end of the book, and Hannah has listed her acknowledgements. She's also written a little bit about herself, and we have the index. And that brings us to the end of the book. So I'm sure if you're a beginner, I'm sure you'd be able to tackle a lot of these projects. The instructions are very clear. The paints used are listed for you, and her colour mixes are listed for you. I'm sure you can achieve some wonderful landscape paintings by following Hannah's step-by-step instructions. So this is basically, I think, a collection of tutorials. And if you think that's something that you would like to do, I have put links to where you can buy the book on Amazon in the description. And once again, if you'd like to visit Diane Anton's studio on YouTube, Diane has actually created a tutorial, at least one, based on the inspiration she's got from Hannah's book. So if you found this review helpful, please give it a like. It helps YouTube promote my channel to other people who like to look at art books before they buy them. And if you'd like to subscribe to the channel, you'll get notified every time I put up a new video, which I try to do at least once a week. And it'd be lovely to have you on board. So please leave me a comment below. Let me know what you thought to the book, what you thought to my review. Was it helpful to you? I'd love to hear, and I do reply to all comments. So thank you for watching, and happy painting.